Hey, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining Bauman College's Holistic Chef Cooking Demonstration webinar. I'm glad to see you here. Before we get started, the staff, what we'll do is we'll introduce ourselves and then I'll briefly go over what we'll be doing today. So first off, my name is Michelle. I'm in admissions. Welcome. I'll pass it over to Joe.
Hi, thank you, Michelle. My name is Joe. I am calling from Southwest Florida, and I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to my buddy, Antonella.
Thanks, Joe. Hi, everyone. I'm Antonella in admissions here. So glad to see you guys. And I'm going to pass it over to financial aid.
Thank you, Antonella. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Samir Ahmed. I am one of your financial aid administrators here at Bauman College. I also take the time to pre-introduce my partner, Mariana, who will be joining us later on, but pass it off to Chef Martina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Martina. I'm a holistic chef instructor here at Bauman College.
Great. Well, what we'll do, I'll pass it back to Chef Martina in a moment. After that, after we get to see this exciting cooking demonstration, we can take questions as well, and we'll have also information after that about our holistic chef program. So admissions and financial aid will go over more details about the curriculum, scheduling, career information, cost, and financial aid, and answer more questions at that time. But with that, I will go ahead and pass it back to Chef Martina.
All right. Well, welcome in, everyone. I'm so excited to see all of you. And I know you're getting excited to make or at least watch this demonstration. But one of the things that we really like to do at the beginning of each chef class is just take a moment to become present. So we do a little bit of breathing, a little bit of grounding, just so that we can be very present in the moment. Because when we're in the kitchen, we need to be very present, right? We're dealing with dangerous equipment, dangerous things. So just being very aware of our surroundings. So just, if you feel like it, settle in to some nice deep breathing. If you have any tension anywhere in your body, feel free to give it a little extra attention. I know I carry a lot in my shoulders, so it's always good to loosen up before we're in the kitchen. Just taking those nice deep breaths. Really focusing on filling up that belly. And on the exhale, just pushing everything out. On every breath in, just feeling where you are. Your feet on the floor, if you're sitting at a desk. Just being present in this moment. We're all here to learn. This is a place of growth and curiosity and a safe community. Take one more big deep breath in. And on the exhale, feel free to come back to us. So this is something that we just like to do. Again, reminding ourselves that we're exactly where we need to be when we're in the kitchen and being focused and attentive to where we are. So the first thing that I'm going to start with today is our crepe batter. So today we're making a grain-free, gluten-free, dairy-free crepe. You can also make this plant-based, entirely vegan if you'd like to, using applesauce or canned pumpkin. We're getting into fall right now, so either roasted pumpkin that's pureed down or even an organic canned pumpkin. But today I'm going to be using eggs because I really like the texture that it provides. Okay? But I like to start by making the crepe batter so that it has a little bit of time to rest. So about 20 minutes or so in the refrigerator, it's going to really allow all of those starches to absorb the liquid and get that great final texture that makes a really wonderful crepe. So without further ado, let's get started. So for this recipe, like I said, you can go ahead and use the eggs like the recipe calls for, or if you'd like to make it fully plant-based, using something like an applesauce or a pumpkin puree. So first, we're going to add in our liquid ingredients. This is going to help it blend up a little bit more easily. And if you don't happen to have a blender, you can actually just whisk this crepe batter up really nicely. I like using the blender because it really gets all of those ingredients well incorporated. So we're going to go ahead and crack our eggs in. And a fun little tip, if you crack the egg on a flat counter, a flat surface, you're less likely to get the shells into wherever you're putting your egg. So creating that little divot by cracking it onto that flat surface, as opposed to using the edge of a bowl. All right, so we've got 3 eggs here. Next, we're going to be adding in some plant-based milk. So I'm actually using an almond milk today because we're using almond flour, but you can also use things like coconut milk, oat milk, whatever you really like. You could even use a whole dairy milk if you'd like as well, but I really like that almond milk for the extra protein it provides. All right, get all of that in there. Next, we're going to add our dry ingredients. So like I said, this is a gluten-free and grain-free crepe batter. So I'm using almond flour, which really high in protein, really high in fiber. We've got some cassava flour, which is another starch-based gluten-free flour. It's actually grain-free because it's made out of the cassava root. And then a little bit of tapioca starch, which is going to really help it bind together. So that tapioca starch is really fine. It's actually from the same plant as cassava flour, but it's a little bit more refined and sort of milled down so that it creates this really lovely binding texture. And then the last ingredient for our crepe batter is just going to be some nice salt. I've got some Himalayan pink salt here, but you could also use a nice sea salt as well. Okay. So we're going to put all of our dry ingredients into the blender. Get all of that good starch in there. And really allowing it to rest for about, 15, 20 minutes is going to allow those starch-based flours, the tapioca starch, the cassava flour, to really swell up, expand, and sort of absorb the liquid. So you end up with a really nice texture. All right, and then now we're going to go ahead and blend up. So with a high-powered blender, really with any blender, we want to start on low. So that allows our mixture to sort of get incorporated with itself. It's not going to explode out. We don't want to start it on high on full blast because that will sometimes shoot out the top of our blender. Then we can slowly increase the speed. We're not cooking yet, but we will be soon. And then just getting it to a really nice, smooth consistency. Because we have some of these really starchy ingredients like the cassava flour and the tapioca starch, I also find it's a good idea to give our blender just a check using a small spatula, kind of scraping down those sides to make sure that we've gotten all of that potentially clumpy tapioca starch mixed in. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and blend it up one more time. Beautiful. And so you can actually see here the texture of it is we've got this really nice sort of milky consistency, and that's going to thicken up as we let it sit in the refrigerator for a little while. Okay. So just making sure everything is well blended. And then we're going to put it into either a pitcher, or I actually have one of these big Pyrex cup measures so that we have a nice pour spout for when we go to make our crepes. Okay. So I'm going to pour in our crepe batter. And if you are making a sweeter crepe, you can also add in additional flavoring here. You can add things like a little bit of vanilla extract. You could add a touch of sweetener like a maple syrup or a coconut sugar, and that's going to bring out the natural sweetness. But because I'm going to be using these crepes for both sweet and savory fillings, I'm going to leave that little bit of sweetener out. All right, I'm going to go tuck this into the refrigerator and let it absorb all of that goodness while we work on our Nutella.
And Chef Martina, we had a question. What almond milk brand are you using that has higher protein?
Yeah, so I actually use just a homemade almond milk. That's one of the things that you'll learn how to do in the program. We have a whole plant-based sort of sequence. You'll learn about different recipes. And what I do actually is I'll soak my almonds overnight and then blend them with some filtered water. So we're getting really the essence, that beautiful extract from the almond without any of the additives that a lot of those store brands use. But just in general, any almond milk that you're going to be getting is going to be really beautifully high in protein. Okay, great question. So I'm going to go ahead and just rinse out my blender because we're going to be using this again to make our Nutella. All right. And like I said, you can use other plant-based milks as well. I've done coconut milk, which is a really beautiful texture. It creates a really wonderful sort of thick and rich crepe. And so depending on what you're looking for, you can change up that plant-based milk. Also, instead of the tapioca starch, if you don't want to try that, or arrowroot is a really great option as well for that nice binding quality too. Okay. All right. So next, what we're going to do is actually toast our hazelnuts a little bit more. So I already have these really beautiful roasted hazelnuts. So they already have that nice toasty flavor, but I find for grinding up our Nutella, making nut butters or doing anything where we're blending those nuts, getting them nice and hot will actually sort of release the natural oils and fats and make it a much smoother process. So we're going to go ahead, get my burner going. And we just want to toast them at, a nice medium heat. Here I've got a gas burner. You can also use your electric stoves, but just going for about a medium heat. Okay. So we're going to let those hazelnuts toast up, get a little bit of color, but mostly just a little bit of that heat so that we can draw out that beautiful fat, the natural fats from our hazelnuts. And I see that there is a question in here, why allow resting time in the refrigerator as opposed to leaving it on the countertop? That's a great question. And you can do it either way. If you'd like to, you can let it sit out at room temperature, but I do find that it will kind of tighten up a little bit better in the refrigerator. That cold kind of gets those protein chains like cinched up a little. Also, it keeps it nice and cold, which can help actually with the crepe, the final crepe texture once we get to cooking it too. Really great question. All right, so next, again, just getting a little bit of that beautiful toasted flavor, getting the hazelnuts to heat up just a touch. And then I want to show you some of those other ingredients that we're putting in here. So what's really great about this Nutella recipe is that we aren't adding in a lot of processed ingredients. A lot of what you find in the grocery stores, it contains extra oils, things like palm oil, lots of stabilizers. But for our recipe, we are just going to be adding in a few ingredients for flavor. Okay. So I have a little bit of sweetener of choice. I'm using maple syrup because I love maple syrup, especially in fall. It's got some really beautiful minerals in there and nutrients. Then I've got some vanilla extract. That's going to be there just for a little bit of aroma and flavor. We've got some raw cacao powder. You could also use just a standard cocoa powder, but I do find that the raw cacao has a really nice flavor quality to it. Also, it's a little bit less processed than cocoa powder, so you get some more of the benefits of those nutrients and minerals in there. And then finally, just a little bit of sea salt. So for your Nutella, if you want to have just a really nice, almost nut butter consistency, then you can just use these ingredients, the nuts and all of these flavorings. If, however, you want it to be a little bit smoother, maybe a little pourable so you can drizzle it over your crepes, you can actually add just a touch of water or, again, a little bit of plant-based milk, whatever you'd like. If you do happen to add the water or plant-based milk, you'll want to refrigerate the Nutella after you blend it though, okay? All right, so next we're gonna go ahead and blend our Nutella. So we've got our toasted hazelnuts. They're nice and warmed up. We wanna get them into our blender. And again, when they're nice and warm, you have all of those beautiful fats kind of coming to the surface, kind of loosened up, so that ultimately blending will be significantly easier. All right, we're gonna add in our vanilla extract, our sweetener, and this is something you can really adjust all of these different flavors. And what we'll do once I've finished blending is we'll give it a taste to see if we need to balance, if we need to add anything, if we need to adjust anything. All right, put in my little bit of salt and my raw cacao powder, okay? One disclaimer, I have a very high-powered blender, so I splurged and I got myself a Vitamix a couple Christmases ago. If your blender is not extremely high-powered, I would already start by adding in a little extra liquid. If you have a really high-powered blender or a really high-powered food processor, then it can do a pretty good job on its own just crushing up the hazelnuts. If not, just adding in that touch of water is going to help you get a really nice, smooth blended product. All right, so we're going to blend. And you can see how it's already starting to break down a little bit, getting a little bit creamy. And what I'm going to do here is I have this handy dandy plunger tool. And what this is going to allow me to do is really scrape down the sides so that I can get all of those hazelnuts back into the central mixture. And you can see we're creating some nice steam from the heat of those hazelnuts. So again, we're kind of creating this nice warm environment that all of these ingredients can kind of blend together smoothly. Okay. And then I know that I want to make a smoother Nutella, so I'm going to add in just a little bit of water at a time until I get to that texture that I'm looking for. Great. And now this handy dandy plunger does a pretty good job, but I do know that I want to go sort of in batches, adding in a little bit of my liquid, and then also scraping down the edges, the sides with my spatula. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just take my lid off for a second. And you can see here right now, I have sort of this chunkier sort of nut butter kind of consistency. So I know that I want to blend it a little bit longer and also add in just a touch more liquid to get to that nice spreadable consistency. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, scrape down all of the corners, make sure that I'm getting all of that toasted hazelnut goodness mixed up. Okay. It smells so good. I wish you were here. We really need to figure out smell-o-vision. I feel like I say that every single time, but Willy Wonka had it right. We need to figure that out. All right. So scraping down those edges, and I'm going to add in just a touch more water because I see here that I've got this nice sort of nut butter consistency, but I want it to be nice and smooth so it's easily spreadable and really sort of luxurious in the mouth. All right, so we're going to pick up the speed, blend a little bit more. And again, just a touch more water just to get that nice smooth consistency. All right, and there is a great question in the chat. So could you add oil rather than water or nut milk to loosen it up? You absolutely could use something like a nut milk. That works really beautifully. The oil, on the other hand, can cause the nut butter to break a little bit. So if you've ever had, you know, the stirred peanut butters, you'll have that oil separation because there isn't really an emulsifying agent to hold it all together. But a nut butter or a nut milk, a plant-based milk is a really great option. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and we have a nice, much smoother consistency here. I just want to give it a check, give it a stir and see where I'm at flavor-wise. Okay, so tasting is going to be really important. It's one of the things we really focus on in your education here is that we want you to really understand balancing flavors. So tasting throughout the process, hugely important. Okay, so I'm going to taste just a little bit. Oh, it's so tasty. I love hazelnuts, one of my favorite things to eat, especially when we get into the fall. But you have this really nice, rich roasted flavor from the extra toasting of the hazelnuts. Have a little bit of sweetness from that maple syrup, but it's not overpowering. So the main flavors I'm getting are that cacao and the hazelnut. I'm still feeling a little bit of grittiness. So I'm going to go ahead and add just a touch more liquid again. I want to blend it up until it's nice and smooth. But that little bit of salt also is helping round out those flavors. So as far as flavoring goes, I'm pretty happy with it, but I am going to be adding a little bit more liquid, which is going to dilute that flavor. So I'm going to have to taste it again once I add that extra little bit of liquid. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a little bit of extra almond milk. So we started with water And now I'm going to just add in a touch of almond milk to continue blending. All right. All right, beautiful. So now we have a really nice, much smoother texture. I can tell that it still has a little bit of that texture just from the ground nuts because, you know, obviously we're making kind of a nut butter that's just a little bit smoother, but I want to give it another taste. So we'll go ahead, taste it again. So like I said, adding in that little extra bit of liquid kind of diluted those flavors a little bit. So I want to add just a touch of sweetener again. So a little bit more maple syrup. I want to add in just a touch more vanilla extract. And finally, just a little bit of salt. And I think we will be right on the money. All right. Wonderful. All right, so last taste test, again, tasting throughout the entire process. So I want to grab just a little bit of it. And that's perfect now. So even though it looks like it's a little bit grainier, all I'm tasting is really smooth in my mouth. So the texture, that mouthfeel is right where I want it to be. That little extra bit of sweetness and salt kind of balance the roasted hazelnut flavor so that now it's just hazelnuts with that beautiful cacao powder and then a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of saltiness to help it pair up. Okay. All right, so we're going to set this off to the side now and then go back to our crepe batter. Are there any questions so far? I know a lot of you have been adding them into the chat, but any other questions, please feel free to ask them. All right, I'm going to scoot over to my refrigerator, get our crepe batter. All right. So for this crepe batter now, we have this really lovely mixture. You can see that it's nice and thin still, so it's pourable, which is going to make it much easier to make that really beautiful and thin crepe. We, however, don't want it to be so thin that it starts breaking. We don't want our crepe to be too tender, too sort of light, because then it won't have the stability to hold together. Okay. All right. So we have our crepe batter. And then, like I said, so for this recipe, you can adjust it for your own personal needs. I'm going to be using ghee for my pan, but you can also use things like coconut oil, other plant-based butters, just to give it that little extra bit of fat, that little sort of flavor. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and get my pan heating up. And for this, I'm using a crepe pan. You can absolutely use just a regular skillet. I would recommend something that isn't super heavy because you need to be able to tilt it. You want to be able to sort of tilt it with your non-dominant hand so that you can pour in your liquid and get a really nice spread on your pan. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, get my burner heating. And for this, I'm really just aiming for a nice medium heat. I don't want it to be too hot because I don't want that crepe to scorch, okay? And what I like to do is wait to add in the fat until after my crepe batter has rested. So I'm gonna add in this little bit of ghee. Again, like I said, you could use coconut oil, plant-based butter, whatever you like.
There's a
And I'm
question.
just,
Oh, sorry.
yeah.
Does ghee have higher smoke point than butter, and is that why you chose to use it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it does have a much higher smoke point than butter. Butter still has those whole milk solids in it, which is what is going to burn faster. So ghee is basically just clarified butter that's been taken down to a nice golden and sort of roasted flavor almost. So yes, it does have a much higher smoke point, and it's a really beneficial fat too. Absolutely. All right, so I've got this nice melted ghee. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit into my batter. Okay, so pouring in just the 2 tablespoons or so that the recipe calls for. The rest of it is going to go into my little dish so that I can keep my pan nice and well greased while I'm making my crepes. All right, so I'm going to just whisk this up. And you can see the texture that I have here. It's holding together. It's got some structure to it, but it's a little thin still. So I'm going to get this nice pourable consistency that is going to allow me to have a really beautiful sort of light, thin spread for my crepe. All right, back to the burner. So we've got a little bit of ghee left in the pan. Okay. So we're going to just make sure that that's well spread around. Going to check our heat, make sure that we have a nice amount of heat coming off of our pan, but again, not too much. I don't really want to see my fat smoking. I just want to get enough heat that I'm going to get that really nice sort of initial contact with my batter. Okay. All right. And then with my right hand, because I'm right-handed, I like pouring with my dominant hand. And then I like being able to tip my pan around with my other hand. So you can see I'm making kind of this swirling motion. I'm going to be starting in the center, putting probably about a 1/4 cup or so of the batter, and then just doing a nice swirl all the way around, just until I get all of that batter evenly spread. Okay. You can see I have some really nice little air bubbles. It's going to give my crepes a nice lacy kind of consistency. Okay. So we're going to let this cook for about a minute or so because we want it to be nice and dry before we attempt flipping it. Okay. So we're really looking for it to be nice and dry around the edges, starting to show maybe a little bit of that golden color where it's nice and lacy, almost see-through. And here is where I want to have either a metal spatula, a little offset spatula, or something like a silicone spatula, something that I can get under the edge just to check that bottom. Okay. Making sure that it's nice and structural. And then I can either flip it with my spatula or even just get under it with both hands and then flip it over. Okay. So we have this really nice sort of golden brown color, this kind of lacy consistency, which is really lovely. We just want to let it cook for about 30 seconds or so that we're getting that really sort of nice, even cook throughout. Okay. We want to have a plate ready because we're going to ultimately be stacking up our plates one on top of each other so they get a nice steaming effect. Okay. All right, so I'm going to slide it off right into our waiting plate, and then we're going to go back and make some more. So here, again, we want to add just a little bit more of that fat. That helps you get that really beautiful lacy quality. Pick it up with one hand, pour in our batter, and just get a nice swirl. And if you don't put quite enough batter in for the first pour, just add a little bit more and fill in any of those little holes.
Chef Martina
Beautiful.
received a
Yeah.
private message asking a question about using an alternative dairy-free butter instead of the ghee. Is that possible?
Absolutely. Yeah. So there are quite a few brands, or even making your own cultured butter can create a really beautiful flavor as well. So I know Miyokos is a cashew-based plant butter. That's really lovely. Just pure coconut oil, unrefined coconut oil also provides a really nice natural sweetness. So you can absolutely use that as well. Great question. All right. So again, just checking to make sure that we get that nice little bit of golden color and flip over with the fingers. So again, beautiful golden brown color, that nice lacy effect. Let it cook for another 30 seconds or so. And it's really important for this when you're stacking them up so that they actually are sort of steaming each other. That's going to keep your crepe nice and flexible. It's also going to make it so that it's more easily folded. So that little bit of steaming provides a lot of really beautiful flexibility. All right, we'll go back. I'm going to do a couple more here before we start filling them. Again, just a little bit of that fat. And this is really fun practice for getting that sort of hand-eye coordination down. Both of your hands have to kind of work in conjunction. Again, if you don't get quite all of the batter filled in, just add a little bit more and fill in those little holes. Beautiful. All right. And what's really nice about this, so in the blog that I wrote, talking about sort of how crepes have changed throughout history. They were originated in the Brittany region of France, and they often were made with buckwheat flour. So buckwheat flour is extremely robust. It has this very rich, earthy flavor. And so a lot of crepes were traditionally filled with heartier or more savory ingredients. These days, we have so many different allergies, sensitivities, intolerances that we need to work with. And that's one of the things that you'll learn if you become a student at Bauman, about how to cook for those specialty diets. So like I said before, this whole recipe without any adjustment is grain-free, gluten-free, and dairy-free without the ghee. But you can also make it, like I said, completely plant-based by removing the eggs, by using a plant-based butter or a coconut oil. And it provides a really beautiful texture because we have those balance of the 3 different types of flour. So the almond flour, super high in protein, really high in fiber, and full of beneficial nutrients. We have things like calcium, iron, and magnesium, and it's actually really high in monosaturated fat, which can help maintain cholesterol levels too. So really beneficial for people that are on the paleo diet. Some of our other ingredients that we're using also can help out different diets as well. We have high fiber in all of our flours, especially the almond and the cassava. We also have in our eggs really beautiful omega-3s. Again, a really great source of plant-based vitamin D, which is not something that exists, or food-based vitamin D. Instead of going out into the sunshine, we can get a lot of that from our eggs. Okay. All right, so I think we've got about 4 crepes now, so I'm going to just flip this last one. Wonderful. Just get that beautiful golden color. Get that nice lacy effect. And this crepe batter lasts for about a day. So if you don't want to make all of your crepes right away, you can always let it sit for about a day to continue to grow that beautiful flavor and sort of absorb more of the liquid. One of the things that you may want to adjust for that is if you do happen to let it sit overnight in the refrigerator, you may need to add a little extra liquid to it so that it becomes that nice pourable consistency, because it will tighten up over that 24-hour period. But it's really great. You can, again, let it sit for about 20 minutes or overnight if you want to have the crepe batter ready to go, and then just make your crepes the next day. All right, so one of the other things that we want to do with our crepes is figure out how we fill them, okay? So I'll show you. I have a lot of really fun ingredients that we can play with today, but obviously the first and foremost is going to be our banana and Nutella, okay? So this is my mise en place. This is another thing that we'll be teaching you how to do in the program about having everything organized. Mise en place is a French term for everything in its place. Okay, so we have beautiful selections of some fruits, some berries. On the top row, I've got raspberries, a little bit of maple syrup for sweetness, just some nice yogurt. You could also use a coconut yogurt, and then some orange slices. If you're a little more fall flavor inclined, I've got some beautiful apple slices, some toasted walnuts, and then this coconut jam that I actually made this past weekend, which is divine. But it's just really fun. You can go into your refrigerator and find any number of toppings to put inside your crepe. I also have a savory option here. So I've got some goat cheese, and then I have kale, sauteed leeks, and sauteed mushrooms. So if you want something that's a little heartier, more of sort of a lunch or dinner option, absolutely. All right. So what we're going to do for our banana and Nutella crepe is we have to prepare our bananas. Okay. So here I've just got a really lovely, ripe banana. And I like using them when they have a little bit of color on them because that brings out the natural sweetness. I still want it to be nice and firm, but having just that little bit of that spotted brown color, that tells me that it's going to have a little bit more natural sweetness in it. So I'm going to go ahead and peel my banana. And I will say banana and Nutella, one of my favorite combinations for a crepe, that sort of delicate sweetness from the banana and then that roasted hazelnut flavor is just, it's pretty spectacular. All right, so for cutting our banana, you can just cut it straight across so that you have these nice little rounds. But one of the cuts that I really like to teach because it looks really elegant is the bias cut. And what a bias cut is just a really nice diagonal cut. So instead of cutting straight across, we're going to be cutting at a nice angle. So positioning your knife so that you have sort of this comfortable position of where your hand is, where it's connected to your body, and then just moving that banana around whatever vegetable, whatever fruit you're cutting so that you can get that beautiful length on the diagonal. I'm going to just cut down some nice slices, making sure that you have a good grip on your knife. So pinching with your thumb and your forefinger, wrapping around the handle with your other 3 fingers, and then holding onto it with your guide hand, making sure that you're keeping your fingers curled so that you protect those fingertips. Again, now we have these beautiful bias cut banana slices that are going to just spread throughout our crepe really nicely and have this really sort of elegant finished look to them. Okay. And we can always change the position because, banana has a curve in it, right? So we need to kind of adjust our slices, maybe cut a little wedge out so that we can continue to have that nice length on our bias cut. Great. All right, so we have some really nice banana slices. So we can add these into our crepes now. All right, so for our first crepe, we're going to do banana and Nutella. So you want to grab your crepe, kind of let it have its space on your counter, on your cutting board, wherever you're assembling. We have our banana slices and we have our beautiful fresh made Nutella. So I'm going to grab a little bit out of my blender. And what I like to do with these crepes is kind of focus on one quadrant. So kind of have a circle, and I want to sort of split it into 4 pieces so that I am focusing all of my filling into one corner. Okay. I'm going to lay down my banana slices. Right. So again, really getting that nice full filling, that beautiful amount of fiber in our bananas, that little bit of sweetness. And then we want to go ahead and just fold it up. So again, folding it in quarters. And I like kind of folding it offset so you can see a little bit of the filling as you fold it up. All right, so we can get this onto our plate. And one of the things that I really like to do with plating crepes is featuring some of those ingredients that you have inside them. Okay, so for us, we have our Nutella. So I'm going to put a little dollop there and then maybe give it a little swoop, a little push so that I have this nice sort of elegant swoop of Nutella. I'm going to put some of my banana slices, the extras, on the plate. And with plating, we really love odd numbers. It looks very attractive on the plate. And then finally, plating it with our crepe. Okay. You can always put on a little bit more Nutella. You could drizzle it with a little bit of date syrup or even put a little powdered sugar on top, or even add just another little hint of flavor with some other fruit. Okay. All right. So we're going to do another crepe now. We have our second crepe here. And for this one, I'm going to focus on that top row of ingredients I had. So we're going to start off with a little bit of yogurt. And this is just a Greek yogurt. Again, I love coconut yogurt for this as well, but just giving you a little bit of that nice creamy base. Again, filling up sort of a quarter of your crepe. Going to add in some of those fresh raspberries. Put in some little orange slices, making sure to leave out a couple of them so we can have a nice garnish on top. And then finally, just a little drizzle of some maple syrup just for a little added sweetness. Okay. So again, we're going to fold that up. Have it kind of cheating to the side so we get a little bit of that filling poking out. Get another plate here. And thinking about different color contrast with our plates and our ingredients is a lot of fun too. You know, that's one of the reasons that we become chefs. We really like playing with our food. So I get to do this all day long. All right, so again, we'll do a little push of our yogurt. Place our crepe right to the side. And then add in some of that beautiful fruit to our plate and to our crepe so that we can know what's inside of it without having to sort of peek under it. Okay. All right. And then I think the last one that I will do is my savory crepe. So again, I have this really robust filling. So this is why I didn't make the crepe sweet. This is why I didn't add any sweetener to the mixture itself, because I knew that I wanted to have this potentially savory option. So I'm going to go ahead and put my sauteed mushrooms, kale, and leeks, again, in that sort of quarter of my crepe circle, leaving some out so that I can, again, garnish if I'd like to. Putting in some crumbled goat cheese, just for the flavor. And then we're going to fold it up. All right, so again, kind of cheating it to the side as you fold so that you end up with a nice little overhang and a place where you can see those toppings. All right, so we'll put this on a smaller plate, a nice little lunch portion. And we can put some of our fillings just off to the side as a nice little functional garnish and just a little extra color on the plate. Awesome. All right. And then, oh, I guess, have one more flavor as well. We'll do that one too, because I have it. So one more crepe, one more filling. All right. So again, for this one, I've got my coconut jam. So this is a traditional Singaporean style coconut jam, cooked down coconut milk with a little bit of the coconut cream and coconut sugar, and then just add it to a really nice thin caramel syrup. It's a really lovely flavor, really great for fall. All right, so add in my toasted walnuts and this beautiful Honeycrisp apple I got from the farmer's market this past weekend. Making a nice hearty filling, something that's substantial. All right, and then again, cheating that to the side. You can do even a little bit more to fold and show off some of those lovely ingredients. We have our plate. Again, we can garnish with some of our ingredients. Place our crepe right on top. And maybe a nice fan of apples. Great. All right, and there you have it. So we have our many different varieties of crepe here, but the one that we did from start to finish was our banana and Nutella. So I hope you learned something from this. I hope that if you'd like to, you can try that recipe at some point. We have some really wonderful recipes in our program, again, that are really considerate of a lot of those different specialty diets. So today we're focusing on grain-free, gluten-free, but we'll teach you how to work with different plant-based for different specific diets and a lot of really wonderful techniques too along the way. So yay,
Yes.
thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you, Chef Martina. There was a question we had.
Yeah.
Could you make this batter raw by putting it in a dehydrator, maybe sub out the eggs?
Yes. So if you wanted to make a raw crepe, I would definitely say to use something like the pumpkin puree or the applesauce in place of the eggs. They should be safe because generally in a dehydrator, you know, you're cooking it past that 100 degrees, which is kind of the money shot for eggs being safe. But using that applesauce, that pumpkin puree would be really wonderful. And then just cooking it until you get that nice sort of not cracker-like consistency because you want it to still be a little bit flexible. Yeah, great question. Any other questions? A lot of fillings, a lot of crepes.
I know.
Oh,
Wonderful.
Chef, I apologize if I missed you mentioning when you had your crepe batter, why you chose to add the fat towards the end, like right before making it.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So you can use it, you can do it either way. You know, the recipe that I had adapted says to just put it in all at the same time. But why I really like doing that is because I like adjusting the texture of the batter, sort of get it to a point that I'm happy with, and then just adding in the fat later. That sort of helps the fat really bind to those ingredients and get you a final texture that's really pourable and really nice to make that batter. So totally up to you. I just have found that adding that fat later just gives you a much nicer final texture. Yeah, great question. Any other questions?
Looked so good. I wish you could DoorDash it. I know I
I
said
know, I wish I
time.
could too. I got a lot of crepes here, so I've got to figure out what to do with them.
Looks delicious. Thank you so much. That was
Yeah.
amazing.